Hi, this is Neil Luehring, Guide with Anglers Covey, and we're going to do soft hackle flies for our Bug of the Month this month. And I'm really excited about this, mainly because when I first started learning to tie flies, I learned to tie a lot of these kind of things. And when they asked me to do this, I went back and got to revisit a bunch of it, and it's really kind of reignited my desire to fish with these things. And the fishing video that goes along with this is going to talk about how to fish these flies. And the truth is that there is no wrong way to fish them. If you get them in the water and you get a good presentation, these things can be highly, highly effective. These things date back. I have a book right here, Mary Orvis Mayberry's Favorite Flies. This book was written in 1892, and it has a lot of stuff about soft hackle flies in it. And here's our more modern Reg Bergman's Trout. This one is from 1938. We're going to show you a couple of pictures of some of the plates in these a little bit later here. But anyway, 1938, great book on soft hackles and all these wet fly patterns that we're talking about. And the truth is, when they were first learning to tie flies, they didn't have all of the hackles that we have now, all these dry fly hackles, the stiff hackles or whatever. They used whatever they had, and generally those were the neck and breast feathers off of birds. Here I have a hen neck, for example. You can see this is the hen saddle, this is the hen neck. These are all soft hackles that we could use for tying flies. Want to tie little tiny flies? There's your soft hackles for it. Want to tie great big flies? Here's your soft hackles for it. All of these modeled colors and everything that we have in these can tie some fabulous, fabulous flies. So don't overlook that stuff. The other thing is, if you have a saddle, this is a grizzly saddle that's been dyed olive, soft hackles. Soft hackles. Even though this down here is good dry fly hackle, the stuff around the edges a lot of time is fabulous soft hackle material that we can get for tying these flies. You can see I have some partridge feathers laying here. Here's a partridge cape. If you don't have one of these in your fly tying collection, this is a really, really valuable tool. It can be used for a lot of things. We're going to tie a couple of partridge based flies here in just a little bit. This is what we're using for that. So we sell both half and full, so you can buy whatever you want in that regard. I've got some loose stock here that I'm going to use. Here's a dun hen neck. This is CDC. I have emu feathers here, which are beautiful things for soft hackles. And any of these hen necks, a grizzly hen neck, you can use these not only for your soft hackles, but to make your wings like on Adams and stuff. They're fabulous for that. And then here is kind of the ultimate soft hackle. This is called schlappen. And this is great big long feathers. If you want to tie a woolly bugger out of this stuff, I'll tell you what, the thing will look like it's alive and swimming in the water because it's 100% webbing. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. The point is, pheasants, all these birds that we have around here, all of them have some component of soft hackle on them. And every one of those soft hackles can be used in the fly tying arena to do different things. We're not going to get to all of those things, but I'm going to tie about 3 different flies here today using soft hackles to illustrate some points. So let's get to the tying. Alright, so the first fly that I'm going to tie today is going to be a Partridge and Peacock fly. It's a very simple, basic fly. The hook I'm using is just a standard wet fly hook. You can use a this is a 1560 Daiichi. I believe the Mustad, or not the Mustad, the Tiemco is a 3671, so just a standard nymph hook. You could use any of the 2400 series Umpqua hooks for these. Whatever you want to do, it's your fly, you get to tie it, right? So let's start the thread. I always like to fill in that gap right behind the eye. Make sure that that's full of thread so that when I go to tie my knot at the end, I don't get my thread frayed. I always like to spiral it down. Rough out the hook on these. I like to come down the bend of the hook just a little ways. So the first thing I'm going to tie in here is just a little piece of gold wire. This does a couple of things for us. One is it gives us some segmentation in the fly, and second of all, it reinforces the peacock body that we're going to put on here, which can be pretty fragile. So when you're tying with peacock, what you want to do is you always want to use multiple pieces of the peacock hurl. So if it's thinner hurl, I'll use like 3. If it's thicker or heavier fiber on the hurl, I'll use 2. So I'll always take and I'll clip this off so we have even ends like that. If you try to tie it in from the tips are always fragile, they break easily, so you always want to tie peacock from the butt of the feather. So we're going to tie these in, secure them to the hook well, come up, and you want to leave yourself a fair amount of room at the front of the fly here for the head, because it takes a little bit of room to put these hackles on, because the stems can be kind of thick. So I'm wrapping the peacock up, I'm going to tie it off, I'm going to trim it, not flush. I'm going to leave it poking up just a little bit so I can make sure that I've tied it down well. A lot of times I see people when they're wrapping these flies with a ribbing like this, they'll counter wrap the ribbing. I never do that. I always wrap everything in the same direction, partially because I want it on the side of the hook where I can see it. That's the main reason, but I also think that it's better because when I go to tie this off, if I'm wrapping everything in the same direction, it's always going to pull that material tighter to make it stay in place better. You could helicopter that wire off there. I'm pretty old school. I just cut everything. So, all right. So, partridge feathers. If you look at these things, this is a pretty good feather for tying this fly because it's got some length to it. You usually only get about 2 or 3 wraps of this feather on there for the hackle. So if I go to a shorter hackle like this, it can make that fly a little more difficult to do. It's kind of a dichotomy in that you don't necessarily want really long fibers, but what we want to do is be able to have enough room there to wrap this thing about 3 times to get those legs. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to strip off all of the really fine fuzzy stuff at the bottom. So our feather is going to look something like that when we start. Alright, second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sweep back the fibers at the tip of the feather. So now my feather looks like that. Okay, now feathers have a natural curve to them. You can see the curve there. If we want that curve to wrap, that feather should wrap kind of in that direction. When I tie these things, I actually start off by tying this in at the top like that. You can see I leave a little gap right here in the fibers. You can clip these out if you want, or you can leave them in there. I'll just leave them in there so you can see what it looks like. I'm going to come forward about 2 or 3 wraps over that, and then I'm going to come back to where the body is, and then I'm going to fold this back over like that, and I'm going to tie that down. So I believe folding is one of the most overlooked procedures in fly tying. It's a great way to anchor things in. You can see how by folding that back over that there's no way that feather is going to pull out of there. Now I'm going to take this thing and I'm going to wrap it, and I'm going to, you notice we wrap it from the tip because the tip is the finer part of the stem. If we try to tie from the stem like we do with a traditional hackle, it's too heavy and it won't wrap right. It just goes flat on you all the time. So we get that tied in like that, and then I like to take this stem and catch it a little bit and push it back so it's not coming out over the eye of the hook, like so. Right? And the key to this is to sweep these hackles back. I always push them down a little bit in the process, and I tie across that, and then we're going to whip finish. This is not a complex fly, as you can see, but because it's got all this soft fiber on here, it's going to move and show life in the water. You can sweep these back a little bit more if you want to. Some people like to put a little spit on their fingers. I don't particularly like to handle fly tying material that way, but anyway, peacock and partridge, very, very simple fly. All right, for the second fly in this series that we're doing today, we're going to tie a partridge and orange. Pretty much the same idea as what we did with the peacock and partridge. Difference is we're going to use floss for the body on this fly. So I'm starting the thread just as I did before. All right, you can do any color of floss on this. I tie some of them with olive floss. A lot of these flosses come in 4-strand configurations on the spools. When I tie it, I always break it down to one single strand like this. I cut it long, all right? So when I go to tie this in, I simply fold it over my thread like that. I pull it down, slide it up next to the hook, and I start wrapping with the thread. Now there's no way that can pull out of there on me. Plus, I'm going to start off with a nice small taper at the back because I haven't added bulk to the back of the fly right there. So I talked about folding being an important part of fly tying to me. There's another example of it right there. All right, this stuff will spread out on you. You can see how it's kind of spread out, but as I wrap with it, it comes back together again. Now you could just build a thread body here, but if you're going to do that with a fly as large as this, I'm tying a size 12 here, and usually these can be fairly big flies. You're going to wind a lot of thread on there like that. All right, simple body, floss body. You can see how I've tapered it or shaped it to give me the shape of an insect. All right, let's find us a nice long-bodied partridge feather again. I'm going to prep it just as I did for the same for the other one. All right, I'm going to tie this on top. Give myself a little room there. I find that the feather breaks. When I say breaks, I'm talking about how it wraps on the hook better if I come off the top like this for me too. So same thing, we're going to take this and we're going to get this to wrap. Come off the thread there a little bit, Mr. Feather. All right. So about 3 wraps here, maybe just a couple. Kind of have to play it by the feather. You can tell that these aren't the prettiest of flies when you're tying them. They don't have that same beauty that the nice crisp dry hackles have initially, but we sweep them back and we wrap. Now one little thing, here's a real subtlety that you find when you're putting a bulky head on a fly like this, but when you get ready to tie that last little part off, always come up right off the shoulder of the eye of the fly and put a couple of wraps there, because if you have those big wraps on there and they come loose, they actually are big enough that they'll slip over the eye of the hook and it comes untied easier. So always make sure you put a couple of wraps right off the shoulders of the eye like that. Gives it a far more durability. So partridge and orange, again, very basic fly. You could tie that with, olive floss. You could do it with any color you want. These things are great caddis imitations, particularly your emerging caddis, but they can also be great just attractor patterns as well. So think about what's going on. You're having a day when nothing's working. This is a good fly to try. It's a really good fly to try because you're going to get a completely different presentation out of it than probably what 99% of the people on the river are showing the fish on a given day. All right, so the last fly that I'm going to tie in the Soft Hackle series here today is I'm going to tie a wet or a Soft Hackle hare's ear. So let's take Same thread that I'm using. I'm just using an 8/0 Uni thread here. 6/0 might be a little better for some of these bigger hooks, but I've just gotten to where I kind of use the 8/0 all the time. So 3/0 would probably work as well too. So I'm going to use a little bit of Hen Hackle here to form a tail for this. Off the back, this one's a little beat up, but we'll make it work. So we'll take a clump of that. We're just going to put a short tail on there. Generally, hook gap or less is a good rule of thumb for that. And my hare's ears that I tie, a lot of people use the hare's ear, the hair off of the hare's ear for the tail. Personally, I always just use the Hen Hackle, so it's much easier, much quicker. Alright, we're going to tie in a gold wire here because it's a gold ribbed hare's ear. Alright, if you want to tie a fat body on these things, you almost need to put an underbody on there and shape it first. Think of your dubbing as a veneer or a coating that you put on a lot of these flies. You could use a piece of yarn, you could use floss, you could use anything that's kind of a color that looks somewhat like your hare's ear. This is a little blend that I make myself, a little homespun. It's very leggy, got a lot of guard hair in it. Let's see how it does here. Now you notice that I'm tapering that a little bit to give me some shape to the fly as I wrap that fly body. That's probably not quite enough, but let's start there. It's always easier to add a little more than it is to try to take this stuff off of the hook. All right, a little more. Now sometimes people, when I watch me dub, they think I'm spinning this hair back and forth. I'm actually just twisting it in one direction. That's the key to getting it to mingle around there like you want it to. Alright, that's pretty much the shape that I want. We'll ribbit. Sound like a frog when you say that. Ribbit. Alright, tie it off. Clip it. Alright, now we're going to put our partridge on there.
You can use a different feather if you want.
Yeah, we can do that.
Since we did two partridge, so just start it like, alright, we're going to use one of these hen feathers.
Good idea. Alright. So on this one, I'm going to use a hen feather for the soft hackle just to show you the contrast with the partridge. The partridge is really cool looking stuff because of the size of the strands or the fibers on it. So with the hen feather, you can see that we have more length, right? And we can see a finer stem in the feather. So we can tie this more like a traditional hackle, where we tie it in at the butt rather than at the tip. Alright, and we're going to take this and we're just going to wrap it around there. Now, part of the key to this is stop every once in a while and stroke that fibers back to give it that kind of an appearance. We want that swept back look. Alright, I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to fold that stem back in the process before I really sweep this back and tie things off. Tie this off. I'm going to take that stem and I'm just going to take and hold it tight, and I'm going to push with my scissors to make that cut. So the whole idea here is to kind of form a collar with that hackle. And there's a soft hackle hares here. Great fly. So I hope that you've got a pretty good feel for the whole idea of the soft hackle fly. The thing we're really looking for in these flies is the animation, the movement in the water. You know, a lot of the trends these days in fly tying are beads and wire. And you can do beads and wire with soft hackles as well. So don't overlook these things. You can bring some real animation into your flies with that. All the materials that we've been using here today are for sale in the shop. If you come in, these guys will be happy to help you find what you need to tie these flies. They're actually very, very simple flies, as you can see from what we did. So take a little time and learn about them. To me, these things are really kind of the root of a lot of the fly tying that we do today. They needed some way to put legs on those flies way back in, 100 years ago, and they figured out that these soft hackles were a great way to do it. We've gotten away from it, but they're still around and they're still really, really effective. So spend a little time tying a few, put a few in your box, and fish with them. The classic cast for fishing a soft hackle is kind of doing everything wrong that we do for a dry fly. You cast it downstream, throw them in across the fast water, and let it swing across that current. Fish will crush it a lot of times when you do that. Anyway, thanks for watching. We appreciate your continued support with this. It's been a really fun thing for me to do. I love to get the chance to do this. Send us your comments, and good luck to you. And I hope you get to fish with a few of these, and I hope they work well for you.